Good evening. Good evening, everyone. Welcome. I am Rebecca Price with the Nashville Public Library Special Collections Division, located at the main branch downtown, which is closed, which is why we are here tonight. But how appropriate. The Special Collections Division is home to two of Nashville's beloved community spaces, the Civil Rights Room and the Votes for Women's Room. If you have not visited those spaces yet, I invite all of you to return and explore these places that tell stories and share experience of Nashville's rich and diverse history later in October. I want to welcome everyone here tonight to launch our second season of Then and Now, the history of Nashville's minority communities, presented by Vanderbilt University. Nashville Public Library Special Collections is honored to host this series, and we are thankful to all of you here tonight and for those watching live on YouTube. And as such, please be mindful that we are recording tonight's program. Before we begin tonight's program, let us be reminded that we occupy the ancestral and traditional lands of the Cherokee, Shawnee, Choctaw, Chickasaw, and Creek nations. We are humbled and we honor all the ancestors of this land on which we meet today, from the elders who have gone before to the generations to come. It is now my pleasure to introduce Vanderbilt's Dr. André Churchwell, with us tonight in his role as Senior Advisor to the Chancellor on Inclusion and Community Outreach. Dr. Churchwell.
It's easy to say next slide. How about that? Thank you. We'll just say next slide. How about that one? Well, welcome everybody. This is really an august event. A lot of planning went into this. It's interesting how fate can step in and change your process. You know, we actually do these at the Downtown Public Library, but because of an electrical problem there, we couldn't do that this fall, and so it turned out that we decided the best place to do it was here at Cameron, if we're going to do a story about South Nashville and Cameron High School. I think I leave my notes over here. And so I think it's really fantastic that we actually have this here on site here at Cameron. So the process of this, we have a template that begins with a little history about South Nashville. That'll be delivered to us by the spectacular Linda Wynn. We'll also have some history of the black story of our Union, the soldiers of our Union soldiers of Fort Negley, another important black South Nashville story. And we'll also have some comments about the history of Cameron High from Gloria, just spectacular work that she has done and created this beautiful book Gloria Pillow will then talk about Cameron. She's written a book, and her book is out in the hall if you want after the program to get a copy of that, I might add. And so then we'll have comments by kind of the incomparable J.C. Cannon, who's here, who knows everybody. He knows probably everybody in this whole building here, I think. And so J.C. is going to give us some comments about Cameron luminaries, which will be really interesting. Then we'll have the second part of the program is when we'll bring up Cameron alumni who have been involved in Nashville. They're community leaders, we call them. A number of you are community leaders too. But they're going to come up and share their bios, their journeys, how South Nashville and how Cameron High shaped them and their careers. They're going to share their path, each one briefly. I checked, no one over there is a minister, so I think we're going to be okay. Baptist minister. If they were Methodists, it'd be pretty brief. And so I think we'll be fine with that. And then we will have some comments about the Cameron TSAA championship team of 70-71 by Andrew Marinus and Cecil Beard. Andrew's a sports historian at Vanderbilt who wrote the book about Perry Wallace Strong Inside, and Cecil was on that championship team of 70-71. If we have any time left, we'll have time for questions. We're going to have Dr. Daniel, our chancellor, 9th Chancellor, Daniel Diermeyer, wanted to be here, but he couldn't. But he did a very lovely thing and recorded some opening remarks for us, and we'll listen to those now.
Good evening. On behalf of Vanderbilt University, I'm honored to welcome you to tonight's first program of the 2024 Then and Now series on the history of Nashville's minority communities, hosted by Vanderbilt in collaboration with Nashville Public Library. We are thrilled to be launching a second year of this series, which, as the name suggests, examines a past that continues to inform our present. We aim to not only preserve vital cultural stories and social histories, but to also explore their meaning for our shared society of today and tomorrow. As our city grows and changes, it is imperative to understand the profound impact of the diverse communities who shaped it before us, and who also continue to grow, change, and flourish here, for all the challenges and triumphs of our own times. Tonight's focus on the stories of South Nashville and Cameron High School is as relevant and urgent as ever, as we address the modern challenges posed by gentrification and barriers to access in education. Indeed, the story of citizens coming together to advance this cause is our story still, and it continues today through the dedicated and singular combined work of Metro Nashville Public Schools, this public library, along with Nashville's many educational and civic resources and organizations, and finally, our university, along with the many outstanding institutions of higher learning in our city and state, including Tennessee's 7 historically black colleges and university. Today, Vanderbilt consistently develops innovative partnerships across all of these sectors, not only because it's part of our core purpose to create positive social impact through scholarship and research, but because our university is inseparable from its hometown. Where Nashville goes, Vanderbilt goes, and vice versa. And our task, as we develop together, is to ensure a future in which our city's distinct cultural heritage remains intact and vibrant, and the opportunities offered by its increasing prosperity are equally available to all of its citizens. We know that education is, and always has been, a great place to start and to continue that trajectory. In fact, this is part of our purpose tonight, as we learn together about the leaders of the thriving black community of South Nashville who united behind that same cause and who worked tirelessly to enable the power of education to uplift so many lives and to forever improve society. We're also here tonight to forge and strengthen connections with one another. Since its inception, the Then and Now series has led to networks that will continue to generate enduring positive impact within our community. I would like to express my gratitude to Dr. André Churchwell for the powerful vision behind it, and to the many individuals who have helped make it a success. And that includes all of you who join us tonight. I hope you will enjoy this evening's program, and please keep the conversations going long after you leave here. Thank you.
Very nice. I want to thank the Chancellor personally when I see him tomorrow for those lovely remarks. As Rebecca mentioned, this is our 7th Then and Now series. And, it's one of these things, being a native Nashvilleian and having the ability, serving for the Chancellor in his office as a diversity leader and inclusion leader, both in the med school and in the university. This was really a key focus for me, a key project that I thought would be a legacy project for me. Being someone who was born and raised in Nashville, I'm very familiar with all, but certainly during the Civil Rights Movement, during Jim Crow Nashville, very familiar with the way this city has grown and changed, but I was quite aware of how it was when I was growing up and the challenges we face as black people living in Nashville. So these stories need to be captured and need to be saved for posterity's sake, because many of our verbal historians are getting older. Not me, but many of them are getting older. And so we want to get these things on tape and save, and they'll be preserved at the Downtown Public Library on a YouTube channel, and will be streaming tonight. You'll have it available to go online and pull it up on the National Public Library Then and Now YouTube channel. You'll have all of them. All 7 we did that include Native American, Pacific Islander, Asian American, LGBTQI plus history we did last year. We did Hispanic history, just amazing. We covered everything. We began with the history, if you will excuse me, of Black North Nashville with the Pearl High story. Okay, careful. But it's important to do that because we need all the stories told, don't we? So Pearl High was an important part of it. I'm from East Nashville. We haven't done Meg's yet, so we're going to do that one. So next year. So, my Spanish teacher is sitting here, Senorita Whitfield, and she would probably come after me if we don't do that next year, I might add. So, there's so many, being also a member of the C. Hubbard United Methodist Church just up the street, Cameron was very close. It was part of the neighborhood. The students that attended Cameron High were members of our Youth Methodist Fellowship Program, and their parents were members of our congregation. So I knew about Cameron. I knew when we got stomped in basketball here and stomped in basketball over at the Meg's little small cracker box gym. I also knew of Cameron through the people I met at C. Hubbard, people like the late Harry Beeman, who started this alumni association, the great late Harry Beeman. Gerald Lawson, who was a valedictorian here at Cameron in its early years, and his brother, Billy Lawson, his other brothers. I know Kathleen Austin, Davidson. I've known her all of my entire life as a member of C. Hubbard. And I knew Verlin Malone spectacularly well. What a force of nature. I feel like applauding her every time I mention her name. But so many things she did for our church and for this community and for the public school system. Just amazing in the library there. So there are many, many legends we could talk about. I want to begin. My mom attended Cameron Junior High School before she went to Pearl. Some would say Cameron launched her to be successful at Pearl. How about that one? So these and other stories must be told, shared, and saved. And as our beloved city grows and expands, these stories can be overwhelmed by the growth of Nashville. So I'm really excited that Vanderbilt and the National Public Library are saving these. And I thank thankful for my partner in these endeavors, Rebecca Price. And we could not do this program tonight if we didn't have great partnership with also members of the Lead Public Schools leadership team, Ricky Gibbs and Tony Majors. Are you guys still here? If you're here, raise your hand, please. There they are. They're very key members that helped us do this. And then Principal Brianna Shelton. I don't know if Principal Shelton is still here. Raise your hand up there. Great. And so, we are just really, really fortunate to have great support as we pull this thing together. So we're going to start with, as I said, our template will be the history of Black South Nashville. And Linda Wynn, Pearl High class of 1966, with our man Perry Wallace in that great class, went on to win another TSLA championship too, I might add. Linda's Assistant Director for State Programs for the Tennessee Historical Commission and will offer us some comments about Black South Nashville's history. Linda.
Thank you, Dr. Churchwell. It is an honor and a privilege to participate with you again in these programs as we highlight the various communities within Nashville. To those of us who had the privilege of attending these segregated schools, be it Cameron, be it Pearl, be it Meg's, be it Haynes, we owe a debt of gratitude to the faculty, the administration, the staff, the workers who employed us to go on and be as great and as good as we could be. If it were not for them, and notice I included everybody in the organization of the school, because each one may have said something to one of us that inspired us. So we owe a great deal of gratitude to those teachers. And it doesn't make any difference whether it was Pearl or Cameron, Meigs or Haynes. When we look at Pearl, and I had said this earlier to some of the Cameron graduates, Pearl gave birth to Cameron, but let us also remember that Meigs gave birth to Pearl. Okay, so we are all interconnected. That's the point that I'm trying to make. Yes, we all like to revel, you know, I'm a graduate of Pearl, I'm a graduate of Cameron, I'm a graduate of Meigs or Haynes. But we are all interconnected in some shape, form, or fashion. If I look at the school in Cameron, for example, J.C. Hull, who was a principal at Pearl, was also a principal at Cameron. We are interconnected. If I look at the name of Cameron, that was from a graduate of Pearl. We are interconnected. And I really do not believe in separating any organization within the African American community, because we are all interrelated in some shape, form, or fashion. When we look at South Nashville, for example, we look at Edge Hill, Wedgwood, Houston, and Chestnut. And Chestnut was formerly known as Cameron Trimble. And they all maintain deep connections to the local African American history. Though each neighborhood has a unique history and identity, all share common characteristics and are fundamentally interconnected by shared boundaries. Collectively, they all have been negatively impacted by transportation infrastructure and urban renewal policies that have effectively disconnected them from one another and from other parts of the city. Renamed in 2005 by the residents, Chestnut Hill was previously known as both Trimble Bottom and Cameron Trimble. It was located on land owned by Judge John Trimble. The area became home to refugee camps called contraband camps of escaped and formerly enslaved people seeking protection with the occupying federal army. African American neighborhoods developed in those same areas. If you really understand the history of Nashville and where African Americans settled, they settled very close to those contraband camps of the Civil War. In 1867, in this area, you have Central Tennessee College. It opened on Maple Street, which is now Fifth Avenue South. And they were to provide education for African Americans. The medical department, Meharry Medical College, which opened in 1876, was the first medical school for African Americans in the South. And after the college was granted its separate college charter in 1950, it moved in 1931 to North Nashville. Central Tennessee College's law school trained early African American lawyers in the South, including Ludie A. Lytle. She was the first African American woman licensed to practice in Tennessee, and she also was the first female to serve on the school's law department. You had other law graduates like Noah Pardon and George Vaughn, who won key civil rights cases in the United States Supreme Court. The neighborhood largely transitioned to working class families. One of the only remaining buildings in this area is the Hubbard House. And it was named for one of Meharry's founders. Urban renewal in the form of slum clearance, began after the passage of the Housing Act of 1937. As a result, many parts of, quote, less desirable, unquote, city neighborhoods were razed. They were replaced by public housing complexes. In 1938, you had the newly formed Nashville Housing Authority, and it constructed and opened segregated public housing with Boscobel Heights, now Casey Homes in East Nashville, and J.C. Napier Homes, located just east of Chestnut Hill on Murfreesboro Pike. Following the then popular Garden City model, these public housing developments raised dozens of single-family homes in favor of superblocks of attached multi-family units in self-contained communities. This was the first major government-led disruption of neighborhood identity, autonomy, and connectivity in Nashville. This policy pattern continued with the introduction of the interstate system through Nashville, particularly Interstate 40, which severed the connection between Chestnut Hill and the downtown core. Not only did it isolate the neighborhood, but the once pedestrian, also friendly neighborhood turned 2nd and 4th Avenues into high-speed, one-way thoroughfares. Also located in South Nashville was the Millie E. Hale Hospital, located at 523 7th Avenue South. The hospital opened by the husband-wife team, Dr. John Henry Hale and Millie Essie Gibson Hale, in July of 1916. The couple first turned their home into a hospital that would grow to house 75 patients by 1923. In addition to the hospital, there was a community center, ladies auxiliary, that not only provided health services, but also recreational and charity work to the African American community. The hospital also provided parks for children who had no park to use during the era of Jim Crow or racial segregation. In 1938, the hospital closed, but some social services continued afterwards. This area also included 2 cemeteries and a park. The first African American cemetery, Mount Ararat, was established in April 1869 by the Colored Sons of Relief No. 1 and the Colored Benevolent Society. Notable persons interred therein include some of the Fifth Jubilee singers, the Reverend Nelson Mary, the sculptor William Edmondson, and after becoming a part of Greenwood Cemetery in 1983, Mount Ararat became known as Greenwood West in 1986. The second African American cemetery was founded by local pastor and business person Preston Taylor in 1888 on land near Buttermilk Ridge at Elm Hill Road, for the purpose of providing low-cost, first-class burial sites for African American residents of Nashville. Notable individuals interred therein include American poet, novelist, Fisk Head librarian, and a noted member of the Harlem Renaissance, Arna Bontemps. Charles S. Johnson, the first African-American president of Fisk University. TSU football coach, John Merritt. Attorney and councilperson, James C. Napier. The harmonica wizard, D. Ford Bailey. Marshall Keeble, a preacher of the Church of Christ, whose successful career bridged a racial divide in an important religious movement prior to the modern civil rights movement. Dr. Maddie E. Coleman, one of Tennessee's first African-American women physicians. She was also a religious feminist and suffragist who was instrumental in building alliances between African-American women and white women. George W. Herbert and his wife, Annie Lyons Hubbard, are also buried in Greenwood Cemetery, as well as original Jubilee singers Minnie Tate Hall and Georgia Gordon Taylor. Near Greenwood Cemetery was also Greenwood Park. It was approximately 3 miles southeast of downtown along Spence Lane between Lebanon Pike and Elm Hill Pike. It was across from the cemetery. The park, which is the first park for African Americans in Nashville, was founded in 1905 by Preston Taylor, who was a wealthy minister and was formerly enslaved. It remained open until 1949. Natural features of the grounds included hills, dales, evergreen trees, and streams. The park, which was lit by electric lights, also had a restaurant, a theater, a roller rink, roller coaster, shooting gallery, merry-go-round, zoo, swimming pool, and a baseball diamond. For those who may have been living way back then, sounds like that was a good place to be. The ballpark's grandstand had a seating for a few thousand people and hosted the games of the independent minor league Nashville Standard Elite Giants, which was a local African-American baseball team. It was also the home of a large annual fair hosted by the Tennessee Colored Association. The 1909 fair included a speech by Booker T. Washington, and music was provided by the Fifth Jubilee Singers. The park was served by electric streetcars. It was at the end of Fairfield, and you can just see that African Americans back in the day may have thought they were missing something, but they also had something that belonged to them, that was provided for them by one of them. Okay? Cameron Trimble and Black Self-Help, there have been several markers to denote the history of African Americans in South Nashville. One is for the Cameron Trimble Black Self-Help. There's one for Napier, and it's not James Napier. It is for James Napier. I'm thinking of the school that was named for his brother. There's also one for Lieutenant Henry Alvin Cameron, as well as Cameron School. And in the not too distant future, there will be a marker placed for one of the early persons who dealt with reparations. Callie House will be placed in Nashville. As a matter of fact, there's a marker that was approved by the Metro Historical Commission, and also one that was approved by the Tennessee Historical Commission. When we look to the mid-19th century, Nashville transitioned from a river city to a railway hub as commerce and travel shifted from steamboat to locomotive. The Louisville and Nashville Railway was incorporated in 1850, and by 1897, Wedgwood, Houston was home to an L&N railway yard, as well as dozens of businesses, mills, and warehouses. Wedgwood, Houston continued to grow as an industrial hub, with Jewish immigrant Jacob May opening the May Hosiery Mill in 1908 on Brown Street, then expanding the facilities to Chestnut and Houston Streets. During World War II, the mill was among the largest employers in Nashville, employing Jewish refugees who fled Nazi Germany. You also had the United Record Pressing Company that was established in 1946 It also opened on Chestnut Street and by 1963, it was at its height. They pressed nearly 1 million records per month, including most of Motown's singles. A connected apartment dubbed the Motown Suite or United Hilton hosted African-American singers and record executives like Smokey Robinson and the Supremes during the Jim Crow era of segregation in Nashville. Fort Negley and the Nashville Cemetery sit in the bend of Interstates 40 and 65, along with the neighborhood's northern border. The city cemetery was established in 1822, and by 1850 contained more than 11,000 graves, including 4 of Nashville's founders, a Tennessee governor, 15 of Nashville's mayors, and 2 Fisk Jubilee singers. Union and Confederate troops who perished in the Battle of Nashville were also interred there. More on Fort Negley will come up by the following speaker. But I do want to say that Fort Negley was built by Union troops following the surrender of Nashville in 1862. It was one of the largest inland stone fortifications during the Civil War. Enslaved people flocked to this particular Union encampment seeking freedom from enslavement. Approximately 27,000 people were impressed into service at the fort's construction, and approximately 800 may have died. Today, the Fort Negley is a metro park. It is integral to the community's identity of Edge Hill, though it has been physically separated by Interstate 65. And you know, when we think of these interstates, I-40, I-65, I'm a North Nashville girl. So usually when we think of Interstate I-40, we think of North Nashville. But guess what? I-40 and I-65 impacted South Nashville too, okay? It was, again, you know, based on these laws and rules and regulations and wanting to do away with communities that were perceived to be by the power structure as less than, okay? So in closing, it's imperative that the residents of South Nashville and Nashvillians in general are cognizant of the history and contributions made by residents of the locale. Reparations has been a subject of discussion for more than a century, and one of the earliest proponents of reparations was Callie House. She lived in South Nashville. She was born in Rutherford County, and she moved here when her husband died about at the age of 36. Also at that same time, she began organizing hundreds of thousands of people calling for reparations. So reparations is not a 20th or 21st century happening. Also, when we think about South Nashville was also home to Tom Wilson Park. It opened in 1929. It was the home to the Nashville Elite Giants baseball team, which was of the Southern Negro League. It was owned by Thomas D. Wilson. The facility was one of 2 African-American-owned professional ballparks. Wilson Park sprang training sessions for the Nashville Vols, a minor league team of the Southern Association. And during spring training, these games would attract such baseball greats as Babe Ruth, Lou Gehrig, and Roy Campanella. In 1946, Tom Wilson resigned and discontinued all ball activities at Wilson Park. And if you don't know about Tom Wilson, he was a businessman, he was a sportsman, he was associated with the Nashville Maroons. He organized the Nashville Elite. And then when he became owner, he also, as a business person, after he quit baseball, opened the Paradise Ballroom on the same site. Entertainers included Lionel Hampton, Cab Calloway, and Sarah Vaughan. What I want to say is we all should cherish the historical narrative of South Nashville, but more importantly, pass it on to the present generation so that they are aware of their ancestors' contributions and how those contributions were to be used as stepping stones for a better future. The path was set before them, but they cannot take advantage of it if they do not know their foreparents' struggles and successes. If the house is to be set in order, one cannot begin with the present. One must begin with the past. As historian Henry Glassy stated, history is not the past, but a map of the past, drawn from a particular point of view, to be useful to the modern traveler. Thank you.
Spectacular. I hope my brother was taking notes. There's going to be a test at the end of this program. I'd like to bring up now, we talked about Fort Negley. She gave a segue about Fort Negley. Angela Sutton has spent a good chunk of her research time at Vanderbilt studying Fort Negley, and she's going to share that with us. She's a research assistant professor of communication of science and technology at Vanderbilt. And Angela, please come up and share that history with us. Just tell them next slide.
Yep. Next slide, please. I'm just getting my clock because I'm a chatty Kathy, so I don't want to go over. All right. Can we go back one or go forward one? This is weird. Oh, this is new to me. Okay. That's all right. Let's go forward again. There we go. All right. This one I know. This is my slide. All right. So, first of all, can I just say, every time Professor Wynn says something, I learn something new, and I've been studying this all my life. I just have so much gratitude for you, Professor Wynn, and I'm so grateful that we get to learn from you every time I encounter you in these situations. So I wanted to give a really, really brief history of Fort Negley. You've already heard a lot of it, so we're gonna compact the timeline. All right, but what is really important about this site that's just literally down the street from us, we could walk to it right now if we wanted to, is that this site was a beacon of freedom. The second that American flag went there, the second the Union soldiers came, the federal military, our US military came to Fort Negley, it became a site where people who were enslaved all across the South knew they could run to get away from that life. And they ran by the thousands. So that is why we had a big camp right next to Fort Negley. They called it a contraband camp, which is a terrible word because contraband was the word that people gave to objects that were stolen. Enslaved people at the time were legally considered objects, and by running away, by self-emancipating, they stole themselves. And they stole themselves to come right here to Fort Negley, and then they built. And that wasn't enough builders, and so the military then enlisted more people to build, and they raided churches, they went to plantations, they went to places where they knew Black people would congregate, and they rounded it up and they forced them to build. And then there were also free Black laborers who lived here in Nashville who'd made a life by themselves by the river. They came in exchange for a wage to help with the construction of this fort. And then there was a whole entire ring of forts built right around the Capitol to keep it safe. In total, we found 4,933 enslaved and free Black builders of Nashville's defenses. These 4,933 kept our city safe from Confederate attack, and they created a situation, thank you, yes, thank you to them, thank you. And they created a situation where Abraham Lincoln would be forced to push that Emancipation Proclamation, and they created a situation where many more Black people enlisted in the military because they were inspired and they wanted to come help. So you had 13,000 Black soldiers and another 366 Black sailors who came right here to Nashville to fight in the Battle of Nashville. The battle, yes, yes, yes. And the Battle of Nashville was the Civil War event that had the largest African American participation out of any conflict in that war, which means that Nashville is one of the most important places when it comes to Civil War history, and we are never taught that. We are never told that. I didn't learn that till I went to grad school, and I'm still very angry about it, right? Next slide, please. So after the war, where did everyone go, right? I already said there were 13,000-ish soldiers, right? About 300 sailors and almost 5,000 laborers. Most of them stayed here. They stayed in Nashville. So can you imagine where they went? They went right to the bottom of Fort Negley, right to the bottom of the hill where we are right now. Please go back again. Sorry, thank you. So they went right to the bottom of that hill and they created a community called the Bass Street neighborhood. Now, a lot of y'all have probably walked on Bass Street. It's where the Science Center is now, right? Yeah, that was a neighborhood that was started by Black Civil War veterans and their families, and they've lived there uninterrupted until urban renewal took that neighborhood away, right? So next slide, please. Fortunately, we know all of this because we're able to go through military records and create a database. All this information is available now for free at the Builders and Defenders database. You can get there with the website www.buildersanddefenders.org. And from there, all of that story is there too, so that you can go back and reference it. Please don't go there. Yeah, please move back again. Sorry, can we take the slide backward? Yes. And so we know because of the database, we also know because of archaeology. So we have archaeologists from Middle Tennessee State University who have gone in and they have started looking at this neighborhood. Please go forward, slide forward. It's all right, these things happen. Right, and so these archaeologists have been working with descendants, people who lived at Bass Street when they were children. We've got one in the room right now, at least, there could be more. Miss Janine Blackman, right here. Yes, everyone please give her a round of applause. She is also the CEO of the African American Cultural Alliance, which she inherited from Kwame Leo Lillard, one of our civil rights legends. Yes, that's right. And another descendant right there next to her in the bottom is Philip Minter. He went to Cameron High because, of course, so many of the kids who grew up on Bass Street, they came right here. They got educated at Cameron. Next slide, please. So then here we have the Bass Street Church. Right after those veterans fought in the Civil War, smoked the Confederates, they settled at the bottom of Fort Negley on Bass Street. Back. Settled at the bottom of that hill there. They built the church. The church was one of the first things they did with their free time and their money, right? That church had their fingerprints in the bricks still, right? That church has been destroyed because of urban renewal, but they have moved to a second location, which is that middle picture there. That second location was on 12th, but then they had to move a third time. So now they're in that bottom picture. That is up on Brick Church Pike. But that congregation is still the same congregation. So many of those Bass Street folks followed the church. Including, and you see that picture on the bottom corner there. So that white-haired gentleman, that is Vernice Scruggs. 90 years ago, he was born in that first Bass Street church. 90 years later, he is a deacon at that third Bass Street church. And he was an alumni of Cameron School. Yeah, he went to Cameron, right? Amazing. Next slide, please. I promise we are almost done, but I do have one more story because I can't leave this one alone. All right, so I've got a map here because I just wanted y'all to see how close together all this is. I think sometimes we forget because that highway is there and it sort of makes everything feel really far away. But there was, after the war, a Black veteran who lived over there, home of Leander Woods. He was over in Napier community, right at the corner of Lewis and Cannon. That was the address that he gave during the many times that he was arrested. We can get into that some other time. But Leander Woods, he was known as a scoundrel if the newspapers are to be believed. However, he had a girlfriend and she lived in the Bass Street neighborhood. Now, after the war, we also know that the Ku Klux Klan and other white supremacist groups would intimidate the newly freed Black people, right? We knew that they would target the areas that were the most important to the Black community. And of course, what was more important than the site where they created their own freedom? Fort Negley. So the KKK would ride their horses up the hill and they would burn crosses on the top of that hill. And they would scare the neighbors in the Bass Street neighborhood, including Leander Woods' girlfriend. And so she was telling him, she's like, I don't think I will survive. They threatened me the last time they came. They smashed my chicken coop. They told me that they were gonna burn our neighborhood down. And this was at a time when white supremacist groups did burn Black neighborhoods down. It happened in almost every city. So they knew that this wasn't just intimidation, that they were really considering doing this. And so Leander Woods bought up all of Nashville's supply of gunpowder, and he called up all of his friends from the war, and they did drills at the bottom of Fort Negley on Bass Street until they got their shots just right, because they had all retained their weapons from the Civil War. They had their old muskets and their bayonets, and they were waiting. So one night, they waited at the foot of that hill, and the Ku Klux Klan tried to ride up that hill, and they got blasted off of the site. Yes. Yes, they got blasted off of the site by a Black veteran of the Civil War who decided, no, my community is not going anywhere. And for 40 years after that, his community went nowhere because he kept it safe. Next slide, please. So we held a memorial service for him with the African American Cultural Alliance. We wanted to give him his flowers because we're pretty sure in life he never had those. So in death, he should have those flowers, and he's buried with all of his other comrades in the military cemetery. Last slide. And we filmed it as part of a short documentary entitled What Happened to Bass Street. So this documentary is only 13 minutes long, and it was funded by the Vanderbilt Community Relations Department, who I see up in the corner. Thank you so much. So we took this money to hire ourselves a director, Zach. He's a local young man from Antioch. And together, we interviewed the descendants of Bass Street, people who had great-great-grandfathers who were Black Civil War veterans who built that neighborhood. And then we went around and asked all of the professors, all of the community leaders, including Professor Wynn, and we took them to Fort Negley, we filmed them, and we let the story fall as it may. And the story is one of a community thriving, a community doing for itself what nobody would do for it, and a community that created so many wonderful alum of Cameron High. So thank you so much for allowing me to share that. This has been truly the honor of my life doing this work, so I really appreciate being allowed to tell you all about it. Thank you.
You can see how emotional she is about this. This is something more than just research. This is her life's work. This is her passion, and that's what great science and history professors do between Dr. Wynn and Angela. We're now going to move to a part of the program where we're actually going to talk to Cameron historians, actually. And we're going to have Gloria Pilla, Cameron High School class of 1965, who's a retired associate professor of English at Michigan State University and author of Who We Are, Cameron High School Alumni, classes 1957 to 71, Nashville's last generation of segregated education. And her book will be in the lobby out there if you want to purchase a copy. Dr. Pilla.
First, I want to actually thank Vanderbilt University and Nashville Public Library, certainly Dr. Churchwell, who's done so much to bring this program to you. It's the same reason I felt compelled to write a book. This is history. This is our history. We want this to remain living history. My classmates and I are all senior citizens. We're not going to be here forever. This history must live on, and the way it lives on is in the telling and retelling. And not just for the sake of telling a story, but for making a difference, for remembering what's great about our history, and even what's terrible about our history, so that our young people might be guided, better guided. I know some things, thanks to JC and our website, about the history of Cameron, but I really want to talk about the soul of Cameron. And before I begin, I want to say, I could not presume to tell everybody, every Cameronite's story. I've made it clear in my book, this is my story. I think it's emblematic. I think an awful lot of Cameronites do relate. That is what I have come to understand and appreciate. But the building notwithstanding, which has been here since 1940, these grounds, these are hallowed grounds. This is special ground that I stand on. 60 years ago, when I was a junior at Cameron High School, I stood here for some occasion or another at a podium, and I can just see, it's not just whimsy, but I can just see parents and teachers and students and administrators and janitors and lunchroom ladies walking back and forth, and all of the activity and all of the lessons, especially the love lessons and the lessons of strength that we were taught here at Cameron High. So I've set my little timer so that I don't go over, but I just wanted to share that history. It's a very personal history for me, and what it has meant has been life-changing. Without Cameron High School, my life would have been different. Not as wonderful, not as fulfilling, not as satisfactory. I don't know how a young Black woman from Atlanta, Georgia, and Nashville, Tennessee can spend 2 years at the University of Minnesota in graduate school in French and 7 years at the University of Chicago in English language and literature without having a great deal of confidence, a great deal of foundational support. That came from right here. That's where it was founded. That's where it's been grounded. And that's why I almost cry when I think about this school and what it has meant to me and to so many others. I wrote this book because who we are. This is who we are. I wanted to talk about who we are. When I came back after 40 years absence, after I had been swept off my feet by my handsome husband, I soon became, you can laugh. I soon became involved in the Alumni Association, and to just cut a story very short, I realized, I sensed that there were certain things about us that made us a rather unique group. Even among Black people. Our age had to do with it. And I thought, what are the forces that make us who we are? Of course, we're different people. We're unique people. We're individuals. But among the forces that factored most prominently, as far as I could see, were the city of Nashville, because Nashville is different from other southern cities in a number of ways, not least of which the fact that we have Tennessee State University, Meharry Medical College, Fisk University, places where young Black kids could look and say, "Oh, wow, those are older students. They attend that school. Maybe I could." All right, small southern towns without that kind of inspiration don't necessarily engender that kind of thinking, that kind of possibility thinking that we were obliged, that we had. Another major force was the institution of segregation. I maintain that those of us who lived through segregation have a sort of low-grade PTSD, if you know what I mean, based on the horrible, inhumane system that was allowed and encouraged to flourish. My husband, for example, doesn't go into any building without knowing ingress and egress. The Louvre, you know how large that museum is? He doesn't go in unless he knows how he can go out. That's a terrible thing to say, but it's part of our legacy. There are other parts of our legacy from Cameron that I just want to mention. The other big factor in why we are who we are is this school right here, Cameron High School. Some people, I hope not many, would read my book and say, oh my goodness, she's idealized from the vantage point of 60 years. That is not true. I have idealized nothing. I speak from personal, visceral, heart-held feeling when I say that our teachers, Mrs. Millie Washington, we will never know everything she did for students. She made me a state typing champ. But the things she did for students, we only know because maybe one student told another student who told another student who told another student, but she and our cadre of teachers were so incredibly loving, supportive, challenging, demanding excellence of us. I'm reminded of Michelle Obama's words, they go low, we go high. Well, the city and the public school system went low, real low. And we went high, the dignity, the morals. I don't know how they did it, but they built character building into whatever the discipline was. And that's part of the legacy that I so cherish. They instilled a love of learning in us. We had such deep support that we were able to feel like, well, the world may not be our oyster, but we can try, we can take a crack at it. We've got confidence. We're going to do as much as we can do. I know that's what this school did for me. And the love, I can't say enough about just the pure love. So as my time runs out, I just want to share that, yes, friends from other states have said, oh, we have an O.R. Jackson at my high school, or yes, there's a Mrs. Washington, a Mr. Leonard Morton was our band leader. Yeah, this school, it's emblematic, it's prototypical of so many Southern segregated schools of that era. I know that, but I gotta tell you, Cameron. But no, seriously, all across the South, schools like this, with leadership like the kind of leadership we had, and the heart of our teachers and our parents and our community leaders who taught us to strive for everything we wanted is what makes us who we are today. And we have our ancestors to thank for that. I never want us to forget that. Thank you.
Boy, that's phenomenal. Stories are really, very rich. It's hard to follow that, but knowing J.C. Cannon is following, I don't think there's going to be an issue here. J.C.'s Cameron High School class of '67. He is the current Cameron High School alumni leader, very much involved in maintaining and supporting the alumni room here that I hope many of you visited before we started the program. And in his career was as a federal investigator. J.C., can you come up and share some stories about Cameron High School luminaries? Thank you. Thank you. Just come forward, slide forward.
All right, please slide forward. I have only a few minutes to talk about the wonderful people that Cameron High School has graduated here. My first superhuman was Dr. Harry Beeman. Dr. Harry Beeman, I need to say that slowly. A graduate of 1960. He received many Oh, yes, please advance the slide. Yes, that's him, and I made the slide. Yes, Dr. Harry Beeman. And he got specialist in education in 1974, his doctorate of education, 1979 from George Peabody College, and he's professor of human and sports science at Tennessee State. Yes, he was a book man, but also he was a basketball official for 31 years, up and down this darn court for 31 years. That's amazing, ladies and gentlemen, amazing. And to top it off, he was the first black to officiate a SEC basketball game in 1972. I hope he gets the accolades for this, not like Perry Wallace it took for a decade or two for them to recognize that he was the first African American in the in the SEC. So I hope he gets it. But of all the things that Dr. Harry Beeman did, the reason why I'm up here is because of Dr. Harry Beeman. Dr. Harry Beeman and a few of his partners got together in 1986. They looked around and they thought about it and they said, look, Cameron doesn't have an alumni. We need to get one. Those young men devised a plan, created a mission. Voila, up comes the Cameron High School Alumni Association, 1986. We've been going strong ever since, 37 years. The main mission was to give a scholarship every year to a descendant of Cameron. So you had to touch this holy ground in order to get that scholarship. Ladies and gentlemen, we have given away over $175,000. You gotta remember that they phased out Cameron in '71 as far as the high school. So every nickel and dime that we had just to beg for, to pray for, to ask over and over again, ladies and gentlemen, we never stopped. They devised a special recognition called the lifetime membership. $100 is all it took. $100 and you can become a Cameron lifetime member. That's special, man. That's like a badge of honor. You could vote in the elections. You could get a newsletter. I mean, you were just privileged just to get so much when you gave so little, but it was worth every dime. So it's a lot of y'all out there that are not lifetime members, but that's okay. See, I know who you are. We have a web page, an internet web page that's been started years ago. We also have a Facebook web page that has over 1,000 young people, Cameronites, that have registered. We'd like to thank a young lady by the name of Deborah Pullen, Washington, for starting. She was out of the class of 1971. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for Dr. Harry Beeman. Now let's talk about some beauty. Next slide, please. Let's talk about some beauty. Look at her. Isn't she beautiful, ladies and gentlemen? Her name is Sandra Bass, 1968 graduate. God, look at her. Skinny. Can you imagine her being a model? Look at her. But that's what she wanted to be. In high school, they called her Twiggy. I mean, you could turn her sideways and this pole was bigger than she was. You walk right past her. But she never gave up on her dream. She went to California, worked at it. She said there was many occasions that she worked for free. $5 was a lot of money, but she didn't want to give up. And then it was proven, if you continue trying, God will step in. One day, it was this famous designer, Hubert Da Vinci. He was looking for someone to wear his clothes. Couldn't find anybody because it wouldn't fit. But they found this girl who wore a size 0. I never heard of a size 0. That's nothing. That was Sandra Bass. She was a size 0. They met, and she became a supermodel ever since. Determination would always get you someplace. Now let's talk about somebody. Next slide, please. Well, Jimmy Webb, we know him as James Webb. Look at him. He's only this tall. Well, it could be a little taller. As you see, he's surrounded by police officers. 1965, Dr. Martin Luther King chose Jimmy at age 16 to lead a Selma March. And most of the people that was in the Selma March got turned around. But Jimmy's little crew got through. And look at him. Poised, self-confident, but they gave that young man hell. The officer name was Crocker. And James Webb said, "We want to go to the courthouse." Crocker said, "Courthouse closed." Then Jimmy said, "Well, we just want to go down there and pray." "Well, if you want to pray, go where you come from and pray with your little niggers friends." That's how he talked to Jimmy. Jimmy didn't break a smile. He told him still how he wanted to pray for him. Didn't do no good. The man's mind was made up to stop Jimmy. Jimmy went on to say, "Look, if I had a quarter and you had a quarter, would your quarter be worth more than mine?" And somebody in the audience said, "You can take your quarter and buy you a fish sandwich." And Jimmy, the first time I saw him break, but he never lost composure. James Jimmy Webb led that march. Thank you. Next slide, please. Look at this elegant young man. Class of 67, Jesse Russell. You know, sometimes it pays to know some students to sit beside you. One day it may pay off. We got a young man here who's going to speak named Alexander Courier. He knows him pretty good. But let's make a long story short. Graduated in 67, in my year, with the Tennessee State, majored in engineering, got out, and he became the first black African-American AT&T Bell Laboratories ever hired. The first black. From Cameron High School. To make a long story short, Jimmy invented Jesse invented the digital cellular base station. This gave everybody the ability to use a cell phone to call people and make it affordable. See, back then they only had those car phones, and everybody couldn't afford a car phone. But Jesse Russell, he's a multimillionaire, and he still don't know me. This young lady's not up there, but she's on the walls in Nashville. Elizabeth Ray Duff, first black bus driver in Nashville. You may have saw her on the news. She's not up there, but they named the bus station after her. She was also in my class. Elizabeth Ray. Oh, God. And now, before I go on, I would like for all of the board stand up, past and present, for a brief moment to get acknowledgement. Would the Cameron High School Board, past and present, please stand up. Thank you. For it wasn't for you, we couldn't do our job. And the next one. Let me sit down and get some water. I want you to look at that card because this is very special. A lot of us have forgotten about the Vietnam War. Oh, I'm sorry, go with you. A lot of us have forgotten about the Vietnam War. They forgot about the young people that risked their lives. Let me go down this list. Henry Patton, killed January 3rd, 1968. Raymond Jordan, killed 3/23/68. Kenny Bradley, my classmate, 68. Yancey Smith, 68. Jesse James Russell, 68. John Barbee, 68. James Morgan, 68. How in the hell can statistics, this little black school in Nashville, have these 7 men killed in the same month? You tell me, and I'll tell you that's impossible, but this is not, because it happened. When they ran out of young men to draft, America decided to go into the safe haven that we thought we had when we go into college. No, we thought it was a safe haven. But what we found out is that a memo came out because they needed some more people, some more pawns. They needed some other bodies to have shot at or killed, and they were running out. So let's go into these colleges and pull these kids out whose grades was insufficient. See, we don't always get the memo on time. I'm assuming that others got this same memo a lot earlier, so they had the opportunity to change some grades, to find a way to make my D a C minus. But when we got it, we were locked in, and that's all it took. So instead of a lot of us going to the Army, some of us decided to go somewhere else because life is very important. I've got one young man, I'm gonna skip because I need to skip through, so give me a minute because he's not on the list. He's on the list, but he's further down. But I would like to bring up Reverend Kerry Carter. He was one of the ones that decided not to allow them to go into the Army. He decided that he wanted to make his own world. He decided that he wanted to live and become somebody. Reverend Kerry Carter, my good friend.
Thank you. I'd like to say to Dr. Churchwell, I'm a minister, but I got your drift, and I will comply. I appreciate James so much. Only James could get me to put on a uniform that I retired in 30 plus years ago. And I'll be brief because I'm afraid these buttons might pop off and hit somebody. Amen. But so I am Chief Master Sergeant, retired Courier Quarter from the United States Air Force. I lived right across the street in the Tony Sudican projects. Came here to Cameron High School, and from that time I went to TSU, but I must admit I did not have the academic discipline that was required So I spent more time in the student union building, the sub, than in my books. Consequently, they had this deferment system, which I did not know about. I was a 2A, but because of my academics were not where they should be, I was changed to 1A, which means that your draft notice was right around the corner, which put me in the category that James has just described to us. And I went home and told my mom, I said, well, I didn't do good at TSU. I'm going to get drafted. But Mom was a very wise mother. How many are thankful for wise mothers? And she told me, perhaps you should go to the Air Force because you don't have the temperament to get in foxholes and all that kind of stuff. You're the more kind of book person. And she was right. I ended up staying in the Air Force for 23 years. But had I known about the military deferment, James, I probably would have studied just a little harder to bring my grades up. But I'm just laughing and grinning in the sub. And as a result, the draft notice came. But so I went on to the military, and it was a blessing. I enjoyed the military. But one thing I did notice when I was here at Cameron as a student, the textbooks that we received were used by, have I got a witness out here, from other school systems. Matter of fact, some of the books had the labels and they're so thick, you couldn't even close the books up because other schools in the district had used the books. Then we got, let's say, the leftovers. And, but I tell you, some of you all know the story in the Bible about the prodigal son. While I was in the Air Force, I came to myself and I began to use the training I received from Cameron. And while I was in there, I went on and received a master's degree in the Air Force, only to come back to Nashville in 1991, and I was employed by Nashville Public Schools as the textbook manager for 17 years. So my mind went back to those old books I got, and as I purchased books for the district, I must admit I was somewhat biased to Cameron, and I made sure Cameron got the best books along with the other schools. So this is great. This is great. So I'm a personal testimony here, amen, that everything really went well. I just wanted to share that. And like I said, I wasn't going to be long because I feel one of these buttons trying to come loose now.
Excuse me, I need to say one more thing, please. Oh, yeah.
You go ahead and say one
You know, okay.
You go ahead, man.
I need to say one more thing. The young lady, Gloria Pillar, her book, all the proceeds, every penny has been donated to the Cameron High School alumni or our Jackson Scholarship Fund. Every penny. Thank you, Gloria.
Spectacular. I guess I know who's in charge here. It's JC. There you go. You know, Janae, you should have warned me about your uncle here, but that's okay. That's all right. I'll talk to you about that on Sunday. We're at the point of the program, we're going to listen to more of Cameron graduates and the stories here, and really, Courier just kicked this off. We're going to go down the list here and everybody share a few minutes of their story and the importance of Cameron. I'm going to start with Clarence White, Cameron High School class of 65, mathematics teacher, Metropolitan Public School System, and at Fisk University. Clarence.
Hello, everybody. Now, all of you people out there that are wagering that I'm gonna go over 5 minutes, you wrong. I got a secret weapon. Okay. For the people who know me, they know I'm long-winded. And they know that they've often told me that I do a whole lot of patting myself on the back. That's why my elbows are sore. So I couldn't be braggadocious like I am without the input, the guidance of the Cameron teachers. Now, it all started for me back in the 9th grade. I had a teacher, and I'm from a big family, lived in the Edge Hill Project, and my dad was a college graduate. He was a preacher, a Baptist preacher. And so I knew I couldn't come home with bad grades, so I just make a B, I'm okay. The teacher was so concerned about my being successful that he went and told my dad the following thing: this boy is lazy. And get him some glasses. I got contacts right now. And I made a B the first 6 weeks, but I made an A the rest of the year. I finished 3rd in the area math contest in Algebra 1. And the main thing about Mr. Turner's class was by the end of the 9th grade year, I knew exactly what I was meant to be. You see, in Mr. Turner's class, he saw that I caught it from what he gave in his lecture. Just like the speaker said before, we had some terrible books. And I listened, and I got it, and I really didn't want to do any work. And so Mr. Turner made me do what they call be a peer tutor. And I've talked to this person. He doesn't mind if I tell his name. There was a student in class named Ronald Stanton. Ronald got into a lot of engineering out in California, and he couldn't handle algebra at all. And so I did some peer tutoring. And there are a couple of words I want to say. First of all, he said, "Oh." He got it. And for some reason, that did something for me, because I was always considered coming up a nerd. And when he said, "Oh," I realized I helped him to understand. And I said, hey, I could do real well with this and make some money out of this. I'm going to be a math teacher. Now, I have a few words. I'm not a man of a few words, but I got a few words for you. I'm definitely not a man of a few words. The few words I have for you are academics, awe, blessed, concepts, caring, knowledgeable, journalism, and mathematics. Well, what does that have to do with my speech? It describes me. You see, if you ask me what I'm doing right now, I'm lazy, I'm retired. But I taught math for 40 years in metro schools. Actually, I have won many awards, and I have helped other students to, and they were black students, by the way, to place in the area math contest. First at Bailey Middle School, at Austin P., and then at Wright Middle School. I taught 21 years in middle school and the last 19 in high school. I have some other things to say to you. First of all, when I got ready to graduate, mathematics wasn't the only thing that I had an opportunity to do. I could also have gone into journalism. And we did so much here at Cameron. Everybody talked about the flash that Cameron had. They talked about the band, which was outstanding and high stepping, the athletics, which was outstanding, but they never talked about the academics. I can tell you that we won so many academic contests here at Cameron. I know because I won 3 of them. And I'd just like to, and I'm going over, I know, I'd like to, y'all won, I can't do 5. I can't even pat myself on the back without all of the teachers that I'm standing on the shoulders of. I'd like to mention that was Mr. Turner. One of the smartest people I ever knew was Mr. Elliott, and then and he later became Dr. Elliott. He went to Ohio State and everything. All of the Cameron teachers I met were very knowledgeable. They were highly trained. They had to teach us because the books sucked. And so I cannot tell you about the 2 times that we started. Everybody said this was just for black schools. The first time we got integrated and went to integrated contest, I was a little disappointed. I came in 3rd in the algebra contest when it was just black schools, and that was out of 100 people. I went to the first integrated math contest, and it was held by Vanderbilt. And the fact of the matter is they had all these schools, MBA and all these people. And I'm sorry to say, I don't think I finished but 26th or 27th in geometry. Of course, that was the highest score that a black person scored at that time. Beat everybody from Pearl. And I was able to translate this I was able to translate this. And before I go, Cameron's math department was so good that I can name you 8 math teachers that all graduated from Cameron, and that's all I want to do, and I'll sit down. You had Carolyn Jenkins, the class of 63, Carolyn Jennings, rather. Mary Horner, the class of 63. James Key, the class of 64. Willie Francis Lewis, who was a professor of mathematics either at Oregon or Oregon State. Morgan Branch, myself, Kay and Faye Green. 7 different math teachers. What a math department Cameron had. Thank you.
Thank you there. Wow. All right. We're going to move along here, and we're going to hopefully, we're going to follow standard nautical time here. Hopefully that 5 minutes will actually be 5 minutes. Next we're going to hear from Kathleen Austin Davidson to share comments about her career. Kathy finished the Cameron High School class in 1962. She's a retired architect here in town, phenomenal church member and friend and colleague.
Thank you. Excuse me while I get organized here. I'm a proud graduate of Cameron High School class of 62. I grew up in this area, South Nashville, only a few blocks from here, on Trimble, which is part of Trimble Bottom, that they changed the name to, and I didn't like it that they changed it to Chestnut Hill, but anyway. My parents, Clarence Austin and Julia Austin, also grew up in this area and remained here all of their lives. We lived on Trimble Street, and when everybody else was moving to Enchanted Hills or wherever, they stayed right on Trimble in the bottom for all their lives. But they also attended Cameron when it was located on Fifth Avenue and before it became a high school. I think Cameron moved to this location. I think it's been mentioned that it moved here in 1940, 41. Both of my parents graduated from Pearl High School in the mid-1930s because that was the only high school for African Americans in all of Nashville at that time. My mother admonished me many times to enjoy my high school years. She said those years had been the most fun for her. Now that I look back on it, I think she was really trying to tell me that life after high school brings you a new reality. We had teachers at Cameron who realized the world we were going to face after graduation, and each had their own way of preparing us. All of the teachers dressed professionally, the women in dresses or skirts and blouses, and the men in suits and ties every day. This was a subtle way that impressed upon us what it meant to look and act with proper decorum. Miss Hudson, one of our home economics teachers, would stand in the door of her classroom, leaning against the door frame with her arms folded, watching the students, especially the girls, as they walked down the hall past her room during change of class. The girls did not like to walk past her because they knew she was going to be looking at them and might call you out and tell you if your skirt was too tight or too short. Mrs. Millie Washington, who's here, always looked young and petite and always seemed to have a big smile on her face like she has right now. Her appearance could make you think she was one of the students if you didn't look too closely. She always seemed to have a bunch of girls standing around her, and they were all laughing and talking. But I don't think that lessened their respect for her as their teacher. This was just the rapport that she had with them. Mrs. Prince was my 12th grade homeroom teacher. She was one of our teachers who had been teaching for a while. And as I was looking in the alumni room, I saw where she was teaching all the way up to like 1966. She was very matter-of-fact in her behavior. When I told my parents that she was my teacher, they could not believe she was still teaching because she had been one of their teachers. But again, perhaps she was devoted to preparing another generation for the future as long as she could. When we graduated in the spring of 1962, schools in Nashville were segregated, and Cameron was one of them. The Vietnamese War had been going on for 5 years, and many of the fellas in our class were afraid of being drafted. If you wanted to go to a movie showing at the Lowe's or Paramount movie theaters downtown, you had to walk down a dingy, narrow alley to the entrance, and once you were admitted, you were only allowed to sit in the balcony, which I never did because my parents would not allow me to go in the first place. You could not walk into most restaurants in this city and be seated for a meal. So this was just a glimpse of the world that awaited us upon graduation. We had fun at school, though. There was Courier on Fridays right here in this boys' gym. The boys and girls were able to dance together for 45 minutes or so. From time to time, there were talent shows. The participants were mostly singers. I remember once Freddie Carpenter and Norma Reese sang "The Way You Look Tonight." That was the first time I'd ever heard that song, and I still remember hearing them sing it to this day. There were pep rallies before big games, for example, a football game against Pearl. But the games were also excuses to get together with your friends and act silly for a couple of hours. There were no shopping malls to go to hang out. There were no McDonald's or Burger Kings to go to that I can remember. But there was Brown Barbecue, yes, which had 3 different locations over time. First was on Mallory Street, which is now Mildred Shute Avenue. Then there was First Avenue right across the street from Cameron. and then around the corner on Lafayette Street, which we call the Pike. I'm sure he was happy to see all of the students that would come in. Again, this is some of the fun that we had. There was no social media as we know it today. But lunch was the time when you could find out pretty much anything you wanted to know, like who was dating who, where parties were going to be on the weekend, who was going to what party and with who. You know, the important things. At lunch, all of the girls would tend to sit together. There might have been one or two boys who were brave enough to sit with them. The boys, especially the athletes, always seemed to have 3 or 4 milk cartons lined up across the front of their trays as they left the food line in the cafeteria to look where their buddies were. You either walked or rode the school bus to school, or your parents dropped you off, because very few of us, if any, owned our cars back then. Our parents needed their car to get to work. That was another difference between then and now. Now school parking lots are filled with as many student cars as teachers' cars, or more. Well, my mom was right, as mothers tend to be a lot of the time. I loved high school. I loved my years at Cameron. I formed wonderful friendships at Cameron that remain dear friends today. Hail to the Cameron, to the school that we love.
Thank you.
All right.
You did it.
That is great. I haven't heard Kathleen talk that long in 50 years. That's another story. Next on our list of Cameron alumni, we're going to have Thomas Pillow, class of 1964, mechanical engineer, and I think related to one of the prior speakers, right?
Yeah. I'll get to that point a little later. What have I heard? Okay, before I get started, just a couple of points I want to make. We talked about teachers. I won't call them particular names. But after leaving Cameron, I've sit in a lot of classes in graduate school, professionally in different companies. And I'll be honest with you, I put our teachers toe-to-toe with any teachers I saw after leaving here. I believe we had some of the best teachers that could exist. So I just want to, hats off to all of our teachers. One in particular, I'll pick on Clarence White, because my math teacher was Miss Ledette. And I love Miss Ledette, because she overlooked all my faults. She was a great teacher. Anyway, I just want to mention her name because I thought she was really good. Okay, but I'm going to present the memorable events that illustrate how much Cameron and South Nashville influenced my life. And I picked out 3. There's no way I can cover. Cameron was part of my life started at the age of 6. I lived in Napier Projects, and I could look diagonally from Napier Projects, and I could see Cameron. I went to Napier Elementary School, first grade, but some of the older kids all went to Cameron. And like any young kid, you always wanted to bet what the big kids were. So starting at age 6, I knew I was coming to Cameron. And I eventually got here to 7th grade. But the first big event that happened to me after getting to Cameron was in the 9th grade. We had taken a better of aptitude test. And counselors call you in, they have this conference with you to discuss those grades. And she asked me, okay, when you graduate from high school, what do you want to be? And I had a limited view of the world and job occupations and opportunities. I told her I wanted to be an auto mechanic because I've always been fascinated with machines. And she says, well, you scored real well on mechanical aptitude and mathematics. Why don't you consider being a mechanical engineer? I stopped and I said, well, what's that? I had no idea. She says, again, best teachers in the world, counselor. She says, here's a good answer. She says, mechanical engineer is like being an auto mechanic, except they make more money. And I thought, I can do that. And that is literally where my career got started. A mechanical engineer advised from a student, guidance counselor. The problem was, when I left that discussion, I told some of my schoolmates that I was going to be an engineer. No smarter than I am, the same age, right? They told me that I couldn't be an engineer because I was black. That's the truth. And the problem is, I bought into that to some degree, not completely, but to some degree I was reluctant. I thought, well, it's 9th grade, and maybe, but between 9th, 10th, 11th grade, 12th grade, I had some anxiety about that whole concept. However, again, Cameron High School and the benefits, the 9th career conference that they had at the school occurred around March of my senior year of school. And what they did, they brought in professionals from different areas in different rooms. Where the room where they had the engineers were, I went to that room. The speaker that came in that room was Dr. James Parsons, head of the School of Engineering at Tennessee State. He was an engineer. He was also black. I sit in that room, talking about these career days and so forth. This is how important it is. I sit there and look, I don't know what he said. All I could get was, he's an engineer and he's black. Maybe I can be one too. And that's literally how I wound up in engineering in school. And I'll go forward with that one because it was that was my life, the change event in my life. I'm going to give you 2 or 3 examples of experiences I had at Cameron. Some of them I kind of make fun of myself a little bit, but that's okay. I can get past that. My wife does it all the time. Okay. The first one was Dr. Elliott. Mr. Elliott, in those days, he became Dr. Elliott. I had a chemistry class, and they required us to do science projects every year, which eventually the best ones, I don't know the point when this changed, but we got to go out to Vanderbilt for the regional contest. So I hated that assignment. I did not want to do it. I didn't have the tools. I had nothing required elements to do a class project. Anyway, I did it. And it didn't even stand up very well with my boards and so forth. However, no one was more surprised than I was that I won first prize in chemistry that year. But the key to this is, though, the whole process required to do that project, I have used countless times as an actual engineer. Matter of fact, 2 of my job titles were project engineer. To this day, I still use some of the skills I learned in putting together that project. So as much as I hated it, the benefit that came from it is endless. It's still going on today. How about learning how to work under pressure? I'll give you a good example. Miss Elder came to me one day at the class, got in her class. She says, Mr. Pillow, I had an overdue notebook. She says, if you don't have that notebook on my desk tomorrow, you're going to get an F. I had never gotten an F at that point in my life. I thought, F, worse than that, Mama and Daddy. I couldn't. That was the first time I ever did an all-nighter. I did an all-nighter. I turned in that notebook the next day. That's also when I learned how to work under pressure. And I have not lost that skill since. I did not get it. I don't know what my grade was, but I didn't get an F. So but that's a good example of how some of these experiences just carry through life. Reading an assignment. E.T. Carruthers, another one of our teachers. Any of you have literature people? He gives us the assignments, 16 British literature classics and so forth. I'm not sure I finished even half of those books. But guess what? He planted the seed, the literature seed in me. At the age of 40, I started reading those books. I've read every one that I can remember he ever assigned us, and a whole lot more than that. To this day, one of the greatest pleasures I have in life is sitting down late at night and reading those classics and those books. And I've got a bunch of them. So I just want to say, Steve was planning, even though I wasn't a great student in that class. I'm lucky I passed. But what he said and did in that class, and those who knew E.T., he had a passion for that stuff. And I felt it. The last one I want to reference is a program which we had a lot of here at Cameron. In the school auditorium, they had a guest speaker that came in here. This may ring a bell with some of these people. His name was A.G. Gaston. He was a millionaire from Birmingham, a black man. I had never known or met a millionaire my whole life. But the fact that man was a black man, I was mesmerized. And I'll tell you, he started speaking. To this day, I can probably quote you about half of his presentation. I can see his face. And over the years, up until this day in time, I still quote to myself in my mind some of the things he said that day. And some very good messages about how to grow wealth. I mean, he was a giant as far as I was concerned. What's the result of all that? My previous results, as a result of my time at Cameron, education. I was able, with my foundation, I was able to leave here, get a degree in mechanical engineering, and I did spend time in the student union. So I did wind up in the Army for a couple of years before I really got that degree. A little detour. That's not bad. It sounds funny, but those kind of detours are educational life is experience. After that, I was able to go and get a master's degree in business administration. Career-wise, I spent a lot of years working for Fortune 500 companies as an engineer. Also, I spent over 40 years as a real estate investor. That's because from the master's degree and that background. and that A.G. Gaston conversation, because the idea of money has never escaped me. I've always loved money. I believe, as a result of being at Cameron, I have a strong desire to be a contributor to society. Just a couple of quick things I participated in. I can't do them all. I taught schools, elementary schools, young people on business principles, elementary engineering, and so forth. I volunteer at my church as a coordinator for a room in the inn. So that's the C. Hubbard coordinator over there. Things have been kind of slow since the COVID. The other thing is, and the biggest one I want to get to is, I am a low-income provider of housing. Over the past 30 years, I've provided housing to over 200 families in low income. Now, I want to emphasize this. Most of these are Section 8 renters. Many landlords, if not most, will not rent to them. I do. And if you come to any one of my houses, I could live in one of my houses. I'm not a slumlord. These are decent, nice, decent housing for people to live in. I think my responsibility is to provide good, clean, healthy, safe housing for these families. Also, a lot of my renters are repeats. In other words, they moved out some years ago, called me because their experience was good. So I just want to pass that on. That's the most fulfilling piece of this that I want to say. Because when you can affect the quality of life for other people, not just yourself. You know, if you just came here to get born, eat, and die, why did you show up? You need to do something for somebody else. Okay, and last but certainly not least, Cameron is where I met my wife. Aww. who continues to influence my life to this day. Thank you.
Thanks, Thomas. Next, we're going to have, because she's been referenced so much, Millie Washington, Cameron High School teacher. I think went to junior high school at Cameron in 57, is that right? Did I get that wrong? You correct me. Says the teacher's going to correct me here, so I flunked that particular part of the test. There you go.
I'd like to thank Dr. Churchwell for inviting me to do this, and to let you know that tonight I represent both sides of the Cameron story, as a student and a teacher. I graduated along with my sister and maybe some others in the audience from Cameron Junior High School in 1947. So that means I'm really young, right? Yes. All right. When I try to remember those years, the one thing that stands out in my mind is my teachers. There are two of them that come to mind. One was Miss Grace D. Prince, who was an English teacher and didn't take any stuff when it came to grammar. And right today, I still have difficulty using the correct verb with plural nouns and singular nouns. So I have to call my sister to make sure I'm correct. Then the other teacher was Miss Eva B. Dorsey. She was the librarian. And she encouraged my sister and I to join the Girl Scouts. And that was okay. But what you may not know is the major fundraiser for Girl Scouts then and now was Girl Scout cookie sales. Okay? Now that presented a problem for us because it meant you had to solicit sales. My parents did not allow my sister and I to go beyond our block, especially knocking on doors. And there were very few houses on our block that we could knock on doors. So you know that when we reported back to Miss Dorsey, our sales were very, very, very small. But what she did was, when she called on the other girls to report what they had sold, we were sort of cringing. But she made us feel like that, I think it may have been like $3, was just as great as the others. She made us feel proud and she made us feel accepted. So you can imagine how I felt 12 years later to get a call from the personnel office that I was going to Cameron School as a teacher. There were two of us, Henry Beach and myself, and we were a little younger than the average teacher. When we interviewed with the principal, Mr. O.R. Jackson, the first thing he told us was he did not want us because he needed more experienced teachers for his students. So you know about how we felt when we walked back to the bus stop, knowing that we were going to be working at a school where we were not wanted. But I came to realize that Mr. Jackson had his students at heart. He was concerned about them. And when I looked at an old Cameron yearbook not too long ago, I was surprised by the number of courses, productions that we put on, performing groups, organizations that Cameron School had. Mr. Jackson was a visionary who wanted his students prepared for the future. Our job as teachers was to get them ready. I can remember one time standing in the auditorium. He walked in the auditorium and was presiding at a program and called out a young boy sitting in the back of the room who was cutting up. Told him to get up, go to his office, and wait for him there. That same kind of attitude that he expressed then was what he expected us to do as teachers. I was blessed to have taught at Cameron for 10 years, from 1959 to 1969. And today, when I run across some of my former students, I am excited to see them, even though I may not be able to call their names, but it's always a joy for me to encounter them. But what I came to realize was that Cameron was not just a school, it was a family. And as a family, we came together from all parts of South Nashville. We used to call 12th Avenue the other part of South Nashville. But all of these years later, we are still together as one. I'm often invited to their reunions, their luncheons, and I try to honor that as best I can. But I always remember a line from our alma mater. There's a school we call our alma mater in a town way down in Tennessee. Through her halls have passed my sons and daughters, and true to that dear school, I'll always be. Hail to dear Cameron. Amen.
Thank you there, Ms. Moore. That is phenomenal. Going to have Cecil Beard, Cameron High School class of 71, whose his occupation has been in computer analyst for import and auto parts. Cecil. Cecil's going to talk a little bit about his life, but he's here with his partner in crime here, Andrew Marinus, who's the writer of the book Perry Wallace, Strong Inside, the great history of Perry Wallace. They're going to talk a little bit about the Cameron High School class, the TSAA championship team of 1970-71, as they bring this story to us.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Churchwell. It is a real honor and privilege to be here tonight. I think I could speak for all of us who didn't have the opportunity to attend Cameron that we wish we did after hearing all these stories tonight and learning this history, which is not just important Nashville history, important Black history, but important American history. When I was working on my book on Perry Wallace and the research for that, it became pretty obvious early on that Nashville in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s wasn't just the center of great Black academic institutions, but great Black athletics, and really was the center of Black basketball. in the country during that period. When you think about the national championships that Tennessee A&I was winning in the NAIA in the 1950s, the championships that Pearl High School was winning in the 1960s, the fact that there was the National Black High School Basketball Tournament that took place in Nashville every year that brought the best black players from around the South to our city, and then the elite basketball that was played here at Cameron High School, culminating with the state championships in 1970, in 1971. As you all know, the school won 55 games in a row during that period, which still to this day is the longest winning streak in Nashville basketball history. You were co-captains with David Vaughn, who was the TSSAA MVP in both 1970 and 1971, and you were coached by the great Ronald Lawson, who's a member of the Tennessee Sports Hall of Fame. And as we wrap this up, I just wanted to introduce my new friend, my good friend Cecil Beard, who's going to tell us about what it was like growing up, dreaming of playing here, and then having the opportunity to play basketball here at Cameron. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Churchwell, for inviting me to this historic occasion. There's so many things in my life that I'm truly grateful for. Growing up as a proud Cameron High Panther is definitely a highlight. I started here at Cameron in the 7th grade in 1968 and attended it all the way through the last graduating class in 71. I became an exceptional athlete, playing football, basketball, and also ran track. I'm so thankful for many community recognitions that I received over the years as an athlete at Cameron. I was honored to be inducted into the Metro School Hall of Fame. Thank you. Growing up in J.C. Napier Court was truly living in a village where everyone knew everybody. Not only did we have our parents raising us, but our friends' parents also looked after us. The friends I played with were the same friends we walked to school with every day. We never had to ride a school bus. If one of us got out of line at school, we paid the price at school and at home. Teachers and parents knew each other, had the same goal, which was for us to be successful. I had great mentors to look up to, like Bubba Courier and John Mack, who taught me how to play football. They got us involved in the sports and Boy Scout programs that they ran, along with Jerry Lawns. I'm sure a lot of you other part of the South people know Jerry Lawns. Growing up, I loved attending church, community gatherings, and the block parties that we had on Cleveland Street that we would have. Everyone in the neighborhood would participate in food, bringing food, crafts, music, and prizes. It would be a great time for everybody to fellowship. Of course, there again, I had great mentors, Bubba Courier and John Mack and several others. Also, we had the Napier School Center that we called the Cracker Box. Anybody remember the Cracker Box? At the Cracker Box with Mr. Ray, I learned to play basketball along with my friend David Vaughn and Michael D. Monk Emerson, rest his soul. We continued to play together all through junior high, along with Freddie Lewis, bless his soul, and Ken Cooper. At Cameron, I played football for an exceptional team of strict and stern coaches. Coach Starnes and Coach Stevenson all taught us to be mentally tough on and off the field. My biggest mentor was Coach Ronnie Lawson, who installed in us the same playing philosophy that he learned as a player from Coach John Wooden at UCLA. He taught us the benefits of working hard, perseverance, commitment,
and dignity. Our first year in high school, we only lost one game, basketball game. Most of the teams we played were taller and bigger, but we managed to beat these teams because we were well-conditioned and focused. That's how we won back-to-back state basketball championships in 1970 and 71. Our record of 55 wins with one loss still stands today. My philosophy in life was influenced by my grandmother, my mother, parents in the village, teachers and coaches. Learning from their teachings and with their support, I received several athletic scholarships. I accepted an offer at Fisk University to play football. I had a great athletic journey at Fisk that led me to being drafted into the NFL and placed in the University Hall of Fame. The influence of these special men and women showed me how to support the youth in my community. I have coached Little League, baseball, basketball, and football teams. Currently, I am an assistant scoutmaster with the Boy Scouts at Lake Providence Missionary Baptist Church. I'm also grateful to all the role models in my life from South Nashville who supplied me with resources and tools to make the right decisions so that I can be the man I am today. Thank you.
Thank you. Beautiful comments there. I'd like to have Ida Yvonne Curie, class of 1969. Yvonne has been a healthcare manager, underwriting specialist, and product development managing.
Thank you. Good evening to everybody. I am Ida Vincent Curry, a proud graduate of the class of 1969. And yes, Ms. Washington, I'm from the other part of South Nashville. I'm honored and humbled to stand here before you tonight. So my thanks go to J.C. Cannon, who asked me to participate. A special debt of gratitude goes to Dr. André Churchwell. This series, Then and Now, is his brainchild. So thank you for ensuring that our stories will live on in perpetuity. J.C. asked me to speak on our suspension from athletics in 1968. That was my junior year here at Cameron. This stemmed from a fight which ensued during the infamous basketball game between Cameron and Stratford high schools. While it was never proved that our students initiated the incident, which occurred after we lost the game, we were suspended for our entire senior year from all athletics. This historic moment in time became the catalyst for a documentary created and gifted to the class of '69 at our 50th reunion 5 years ago. This labor of love, thank you. This labor of love, as I titled it, is The Past is Prologue, by the way, which was our high school senior class motto. It chronicles the interviews from students and our teachers, Ms. Washington was one of them, as well, as they recall the events of that game. One of our illustrious teachers, as I mentioned, and a fan favorite is here with us today, Ms. Washington. I was privileged to serve as an executive producer on the documentary, along with Tanya Copeland Gray and Deborah Majors Bell, who were not able to be here with us tonight. Though peaceful protests were held, which included marching to the Board of Education as well as to the courthouse, the suspension was upheld. To this end, I began to realize that South Nashville youth of the '60s were not fearful of their protest or whether the outcome could have been dangerous. Rather, we united for what we felt to be right. I give kudos to the teachers who turned a blind eye, knowing we were leaving school for that purpose. Again, Miss Washington was one of them. And we also give thanks to the late Reverend James Moon, the then leader of C. Hubbard, who selflessly allowed us to gather at the church to get our thing together so we could march. To all the students who marched bravely, and finally to our principal, none other like him, the late O.R. Jackson, who continued to lead his school with grace and dignity in spite of the outcome. I say thank you to all. Living and being educated in South Nashville was amazing, phenomenal, extraordinary. What a cozy cocoon in which to thrive, especially during those times. We left our parents and we came to school to our parents, and that meant an awful lot. And I'm proud to present to Dr. Churchwell a copy of our documentary DVD for your viewing pleasure. Thank you.
That's right. Thank you so much. I'm going to hear now from Alexander Courier, Cameron High School class of 67. Role in life has been president and CEO of IT Solutions by Design Incorporated. Alexander.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Alexander Courier, child of South Nashville, okay? Life wasn't easy. Family stuck together. We worked hard. We paid the price. We missed out on a lot of things. But integrity, focus, determination is something we got a whole lot of. Now, I went to school with Jesse Russell. He's a millionaire. He brought new technology in. Went to school with J.C. Cannon, okay? And, but we competed. And we competed from day one, and we were good friends. I beat him in 50 yards. He blow past me 100 yards, okay? But that was the kind of competition that we faced every day. So when we walked out of Cameron, when we graduated, we were ready to take on anybody at any time and any moment. And it's still like that today. Okay, my career, I graduated from Tennessee State, electrical engineering degree. Spent 21 years at IBM, all different types of jobs. Worked for the state of Tennessee, for the TBI. I was IT director for Tennessee Department of Labor. I worked for another 11 years with Hitachi Data Systems. I've been traveled around the world and received all kind of awards. But Nashville is the place that bore and bred me. I'm a fighter. After 37 years in the IT industry, I opened a company called IT Solutions by Design that allowed me to bring my expertise, talent, know-how as one of the top storage and SAN architect in the industry in 2009. I came back to Nashville, I opened my company. We had modest success. We should have had greater success because I brought industry experience to the masses. But a lot of things about Nashville have not changed, okay? There's still a lot of Jim Crow in Nashville. So after 9 years, I shuttered my business because I had to look after my mother, who was in the 90s, and I started to have a little health condition. But one thing I know, that this dog never gives up his fight. So, after being discriminated by Metro Nashville and most of the corporations in the city who had minority suppliers that wouldn't even give me an interview, with a resume that I had to top most of the IT directors in the city, I said, hell no. So I closed my business. I moped around for a little while, and I joined the NAACP, and Don Majors and I, from 2019 to 2021, raised hell in the city. The disparity study, Metro Nashville government and associated businesses in the city have discriminated against minorities since I was born. In 1999, they failed the disparity study. In 2008, they failed the disparity study. In 2018, they failed the disparity study. And we brought them to task. And in 2019, the Equal Opportunity, the EOB program, Equal Opportunity Procurement Program, was launched in Tennessee. Unanimous decision by all the council members. But you would think, after failing disparity tests 3 years, that the city would step up. Well, let me say this. They half-stepping then, they half-stepping now, okay? Now, I left in NAACP Economic Development Committee because I was fed up of supplying data and knowledge when we were not getting results. Until you sue the people that take away your rights and put them on the spotlight, they don't budge. So I moped around for a little while, and I decided to give my life a chance. I buried my mother in 21, and it took me some time to get over that. But now, I'm ready to go back to war. So let me just say this here. When you come out of the Cameron, and you came through the class we came up, you're going to either cut mustard or you're going to go somewhere else. And the friends I had, we depend on one another. We like brothers. One go down, the other will pop up. Now, the last story I'm going to say is my wife. Now, I invited her to the junior prom in the 11th grade. She said yes. But I had to trip a man to keep from getting to her and asking her first. But we've been together 51 years. She knows I'm emotional. She knows I don't play when it comes to integrity and the truth. And I tell my sons the same way. You vote or you can't come to my house. You show integrity or I don't want to see you. So people, that's what Cameron meant to me. It was the wind beneath my wings and our class motto, from here to greater heights. Thank you.
Boy, save the best for last. Save the best for last.
Powerful stories. Show the Cameron spirit, though. Last in our group is Ronnie Greer, Cameron High School class of 1969, and former Metro Nashville councilman. Ronnie.
Yes, sir, Mr. Greer.
Protocol having been set, he told you who I am. Cameron High School, what does it mean? South Nashville, what does it mean? I was in the class of 69, and Ida mentioned that we were a suspended class for 69. We did not have any athletics from March of 1968 until the football team started playing again in September of 1969. On that team with me was a guy named Oscar Haley, who was about 6'5", 6'6", and weighed about 275 pounds. Now, Oscar and I had grown up together, went to church together, so we knew, we all knew that if anybody was going to go play professional college football, Oscar had the size at that time to go. So he and I were already done butted up. He's going, I'm going with him. That didn't happen. Fast forward, I was given the opportunity, the blessing it was, to become the Metro Councilman for the 17th District, which included the other part of South Nashville. And for me, I represented the neighborhood I'd grown up in. My great-grandmother moved here from Smyrna, raised her family, started the raising of my family, So I count my years along Edge Hill in the South Nashville to 140 years, back to my great-grandmother. From our school, from the Cameron High School, when they shut Cameron's doors in 1971, our teachers became the teachers of teachers. Mr. Leonard Morton became the director of music for Metro's public schools. There is a music teacher in every elementary school in Metro right now because Mr. Morton insisted that become the case. Miss Millie Washington said she left here in 1969 as her last teaching year, but guess what? She became the teacher of those who taught typing, business administration, excuse me, I stand corrected. The point is, our teachers were just that great. They taught us, then they went to teach everybody else how that was done. Now, while I was in the Metro Council, Bird spoke to the problems we have in Nashville still today. As I was a member of the Metro Council, there were some newspaper reporters who were doing articles on the changing nature of South Nashville, the other part of South Nashville, because it started there first. They wrote articles that claimed that the new white people who had moved into our neighborhood were urban pioneers. Urban pioneers. So I asked a young lady who lived in the district and was a reporter for the Tennessee, and I said, what do you mean by that? What do you mean by that? She said, well, they came because they will come to save the neighborhood from the crack-infested neighborhood that it was. Anybody in here who lived or knew the other part of South Nashville, there was no crack-infested neighborhood. We had the same crack problem that every community in the nation had. In our neighborhood, the McKissicks lived on 15th and Edge Hill. They owned several homes on the block. If you don't know the McKissicks, they are one of the nation's largest engineering and construction firms. Dr. W.O. Smith lived on Villa, raised his children in South Nashville. He now has, his monument stands at the corner of 8th and Edge Hill. It is called the W.O. Smith Community Music School, 40 years now and still going. The Reverend Kelly Miller Smith, who was the spiritual leader for the civil rights movement, those who worked in this town, lived on Caldwell Avenue. So we had in our neighborhood, when that lady said crack ghetto or pioneers, it pissed me off, excuse me. So I sent word back to the reporters for the Tennessean and the papers that if they ever made that statement again, certainly if they put it in print, they were not going to like anything that I would say. And because of my time on the council at that point, they knew that if I'm finna say something you ain't gonna like, you ain't gonna like it. And I don't care if you don't. But I close with this. Mr. Jackson chose our teachers. He vetted them. They had to be of the same mind that he had, okay? The auditorium, the dispute at the Municipal Auditorium, the Board of Education, the directors went to Mr. Jackson to tell him to tell his students to go home and sit down somewhere. Mr. Jackson, knowing his students and knowing what he had taught us, he could not tell us to go home and sit down because we were not doing anything wrong. We were just being disruptive, very peacefully being disruptive. So we were blessed to have those folk to teach us, to raise us, to bring us to this point. And I say this, my time in the council, that was one of the greatest, that's my greatest achievement, I would think. But top that was one of our teachers was asked one day, or I introduced myself at a gathering where there were some teachers, and I told them I'm the councilman for the 17th district. And one of those teachers who was here with us said to the group, Ola G. Hudson is her name. She said to the group, and he has done us quite proud. With that, I know that I did what I was supposed to do for those 8 years. Cameron High School is the reason for it. I'm gonna call Ms. Washington's name because she is our love. Okay. That being said, if you're not registered to vote, get registered. If you're not voting, vote. If you know anybody who's not voting, bust them in their head. They have to vote. This is the most important election in our lifetimes. This is the most important election in our lifetimes. Some before me have mentioned that, the problems we had, segregated and doing those things, that was hard. I remember my father telling us, don't go past that block from the time I was 8, 9, 10 years old, because you might not come back from that block. Well, this election is worse for us, for this country, than the idea that I couldn't walk past Ackland Avenue for fear that white folk would get me over there and hang me by a tree. So if you're not registered to vote, please tell somebody. If you know somebody that has transportation, take them to the polls, because that's what we need to do. Thank you.
You are who I thought you were. What a rich, diverse set of stories. It points to the magnificence of the teaching, education, experiences that these people have experienced during their time here at Cameron High School. There's nothing more for me to add to that other than saying thank you all for coming and sharing that with us. Yeah. Especially Kathy Austin. This was really hard for her to do this. There you go. That's great. Well, I want to thank everybody for coming tonight. This is the 7th of the series. We'll be continuing the series starting in December with some other great communities to talk about, to share, and to learn about their stories. I want to thank some people before we close. Once again, Rebecca Price. Rebecca's still here, our program coordinator for special projects. Spectacular that she really has been a great partner with me on this. And then from the Lead Public Schools leadership, Ricky Gibbs, Tony Majors, really thank you all. We couldn't have done this. Brianna Shelton, principal of Cameron Middle School. And Maggie Sneed, who I didn't talk about the first time, was principal of Lead Academy. Couldn't have done it without her. And then lastly, for all of these programs, they would not have been done and could not have been done without the help of Marla Robertson, my executive assistant. Marla, you still here? Raise your hand. Please, there she is. Could not do this. And then, as my great teacher, Willis Hurst, would tell me anytime he finished a major project, no Doretha Churchwell, who's my wife, no project for André. So there you go. So thank you, honey, for being here, and thank you all for coming. Thank you.